Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Missy Hicks, and I am the co-founder of Wonders and Worries and the director of the Registered Wonders and Worries Provider Program. I would like to welcome you to our November Wonder Chat. And before we get started, as always, I just have a little bit of housekeeping to take care of. Want you to know that your video and audio are automatically muted upon entering. We don't use chat in these Wonder Chats. Doesn't make sense, but we don't. But we do use the Q&A feature. So if you have a question for one of our presenters and would like to type it in the Q&A, I'll be moderating that, and I may drop it in during their presentation, or I may hold it till the end. But please feel free to put your questions. We would love to answer those for you. The recorded webinar and any supplemental materials we may have will be posted to our website in the For Professionals section. And then we'll just kind of work through this. If there's any technology issues, a lot of times it's on your end, but I'll be monitoring on our end as well. Some additional housekeeping pieces of information are about evaluations and PDUs. So when you leave this meeting today, the evaluation will pop up automatically. We would certainly appreciate the feedback. I promise you, I read every piece of it, and we look at it, and we really look to see how we can improve or change things. So if you could do that evaluation, I would really appreciate it. For PDUs, our Wonder Chats are always available to listen to at no charge, just for professional growth. If you need PDUs for recertification, you can go onto our website and you can purchase the post-assessment. So if you purchase the post-assessment, we have just a nominal fee of $10 for that. Purchase the post-assessment, take it and be successful. Then you'll get your certificate for the PDU. Also, my very last slide has a QR code to get you right to the store to purchase the post-assessment. So that will certainly be there for you as well. Now, I would love to introduce you to our speakers for today. As you know, we sort of have walked through a series of working with children of adult patients in these Wonder Chats. We did the initial one in September. Kathleen and I kind of laid that foundation of what are the needs and what are the issues confronting these families. Last month, we talked about brief interventions, like what happens when you have to just walk into the ICU, or you meet families for one time, or you get a phone call to do a consultation. Now this month, we are gonna talk about extended encounters, like what happens when you have more time with families. So I am thrilled to have Rachel Delavet here from Baylor Scott and White Medical Center, the McKinney location, and she works on the palliative care team of child life specialists. And if y'all haven't seen how Baylor has really grown this program of child life specialists straight for children of adult patients, they have done some miraculous work. So really take a look at that. But I'm thrilled to have Rachel here today to share her experiences with you. And we have Deanna Smith. I think you probably have met Deanna before on one of our Wonder Chats. Deanna is our team lead child life specialist at Wonders and Worries in our San Antonio office. So I'm thrilled to have Deanna here as well to share some more about her work and the examples of things that they do. So I would like to turn it over to Rachel to get started.
Thank you so much, Missy, and Deanna and I are so excited to talk with y'all today. We are figuring out our technology as we go along, so if there's some hiccups in the slides, we apologize. But today we're really talking about what does extended time with families look like. And as Missy mentioned, I am one of the child life specialists at Baylor Scott and White, and I work at our McKinney location. And kind of what our team does, or how we work with patients and families within our role, is first, just talking with families. What does it look like to provide support to patients and families? Then we have some handout materials that we're able to provide to families. And then lastly, we have individual spaces at all of our hospitals where we're able to meet with children and provide them support one-on-one. But today, I'm really going to talk you through a case study of a family that I worked with for approximately 6 months. I met with the family in the ICU. So we're going to talk a lot today about me specifically talking about how do you make changes to interventions over time when you're working with the same family? How do you meet that family where they're at? What activities can you really bring to those in the moment? How do you address anticipatory grief throughout the journey of supporting patients and families? In this case, what does bereavement support look like for families? We're really fortunate that we're able to continue to meet with patients and families even after their loved one has died. And then what does our scope of practice look like as child life specialists? So when is it time to make that community referral? When is that time to make a referral to a therapist, to a counselor, to a play therapist, kind of depending. And on the slide, you'll see a couple of interventions that we do. A lot of work sometimes is preparing children to attend funerals. And then lastly, in the bottom, you see a Jenga game. We end every visit that we do with patients, and when we meet with kids in our office or when we do an activity visiting the bedside in the ICU, we want to end every visit with normalized play. We recognize that a lot of times the support that the things that we're talking about in those visits can be really heavy. And so we want to have some moments of normalcy. With this family in particular, we ended every encounter with Jenga, and it was really just nice for them as a family just to have, 10 minutes just to be a family and play and laugh again. And so how are we creating those moments for our families? So in this particular case, this Smith family, David Smith was 42 years old, and he was admitted to our ICU with acute alcoholic hepatitis. It was his first admission for any hepatitis, and the plan was that he was going to discharge from our hospital and continue further workup for cirrhosis, or what they suspected to be cirrhosis. He was married to Jane, and they had 3 children, Amy, who was 14, Raymond, who was 12, and Penny, who was 9. And we provided this support over a period of 6 months. And here's our handprint poster that we did with them in the ICU. So our initial referral, really when I first met with Jane and David, he had been in our hospital for 2 weeks, and Jane was really looking for support. And how did she talk to her kids about their dad being in the ICU? We talked a lot about how to talk about dad's big sick, and that his big sick was in his liver. How are we addressing, in this case, that there was an alcohol component? So kind of explaining that piece and some of that drive and that addiction piece. And so how sometimes people's brain can have a big sick, and that can cause them to have issues with alcohol or drugs. And then Jane's other big question was she didn't really want her kids coming up to the ICU. We talked about that initially. They were maintaining family connection through FaceTime, but she was really wondering, were there other things that they could be doing as a family? So we talked about things like FaceTime, I think, is great in this, especially in the time of Corona when we're not having a ton of patient visitors at our hospital, but also, how can we letter write, or can we color pictures to decorate the room? And that was something that they really took to heart as a family. So you walked into his room and there were cards, and you felt like I hadn't met them at this point. So it was a lot of just meeting them through Jane and through David. We talked a lot about, how do we support each of their kids who were a little bit of each of a different developmental age level. So a lot of education that was provided, a lot of just kind of check-ins, how were things going, really encouraging Jane to keep routine as normal as possible. They were lucky that their school was very supportive of the kids during this time. So really just kind of meeting them where they were at. Unfortunately, David decompensated and ended up intubated and in multi-organ system failure. So it was nice to have that we had already met. So we had that rapport and that established relationship that we could then begin to talk about how sometimes when the body is too sick, how it's not going to get better. And so really being able to give Jane those tools to be able to prepare her children. At this point, Jane requested that her kids she did end up wanting her kids to come up to visit dad. So we talked about the importance of providing choice to visit, respecting each of the kids' choice to visit. In this case, all 3 kids did want to visit, and we're really lucky. This is a copy of the front of our Visiting the Hospital booklet that we have at the hospital that we're able to use to prepare kids to come in and, see a ventilator, see tube feeds, see Foley's, talk about how their person can't talk back to us if they're restrained, kind of beginning to prepare them for what they're going to see and experience in the ICU. And then we also, at this point, we were hopeful that David could improve. So we did some connection activities that we'll talk about on the next slide. But also we recognized, unfortunately, that David was not going to get better, and the family made the loving decision to withdraw life-sustaining treatment. So I was lucky in the fact that I had been able to meet with the kids a couple of days prior to that decision and build some rapport with them, so that when we did talk about the fact that we were going to withdraw the ventilator, that we did believe that Dad was going to die, that wasn't the first time I had met the kids. And so we were able to build on some of that language. I think sometimes the benefit of time is that you're able to plant seeds with families as you go along, of, you know, not providing any absolutes that our person is going to get better, that we're just pacing the situation with them. And that is the luxury of time, is that you get to have those conversations and you get to pace some of those conversations. In our preparation to say goodbye, we were able to complete the handprint poster. We do wooden thumbprint hearts. There's an example on a slide in a couple of places. And then that final bedside visit, giving each of the kids the opportunity to say goodbye to Dad was really important to them. But also giving their oldest daughter wanted to just have some time with her dad, and so did Raymond, who was 12. Penny wanted somebody to be with her. So how were we able to kind of meet each of those kids' individual needs, but also continuing to support the family? So in meeting with the kids, I think it's always imperative, and I feel like we talk about this a lot in our role. It's just very ingrained in how I practice, but that you're getting parental permission prior to each visit is so incredibly important. You want to make sure that the language that you're using with kids is language that's being used with the family. And this, I feel like, is especially important in this case because there was a component of alcohol. And so was Jane comfortable with me talking about that with her kids? And what did that look like? And being able to kind of navigate, how was she talking with her children about that? When meeting with kids, it's never, what is my goal as a child life specialist? It's really meant to be kind of an in tandem, it's in tandem support for families. What did our connection activities look like? So in the beginning, in that initial visit that I met with the kids when they were coming up to see Dad for the first time intubated, we did picture frames. So each kid was able to decorate their own picture frame. We were able to take pictures and leave them in the room. And that was really helpful for staff too, just to see what that looked like. Some other connection items that we were able to do were bracelets. So each child had created a bracelet to be able to give. Dad had a bracelet from each of his children, and they each created a bracelet. And then a way for them to kind of have some family time together was the decoration of bears. So we decorated a bear for Dad, and they each contributed, and then they each decorated one for themselves. So that was something that they could leave with Dad. And then as we knew that we were transitioning to withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment, you know, asking the kids, did they want their bracelets to stay with Dad? Did they want those items to come home with them? And so ultimately they each chose for their bracelets to stay with Dad, but that they wanted their bear and their frames to come home with them. So, you know, providing some choice where we can. I think in these cases, we recognize that there's so little control and choice that families have. So even if it's sometimes the simplest choice of, you know, do you want to go into Dad's room by yourself? Or do you want someone to come with you? Or do you want to choose these stickers or those stickers? You know, those were some little choices that gave these kids some control in a situation where they had none. And then anticipatory grief. That was something that I spoke with Jane about in our first visit. I think sometimes we kind of focus on that grief is, you know, only when someone is dying. But in this case, it was while he was in the hospital, there was a school dance, so he was going to miss that. So talking with her about it was okay to grieve the loss of normal. It was, you know, Mom was up at the hospital every day, so she wasn't home kind of doing those things, and Grandma was helping out with those things, or Aunt and Uncles were helping out with those things. And so really acknowledging that with families and talking about what those typical responses are that we look at in anticipatory grief, but also in times of stress. And, you know, then as we recognized that we knew that David was going to die, you know, acknowledging those feelings. I remember having a conversation with the kids' aunt and uncle in the hallway, and they were just very concerned because the kids were very emotional on the day that we withdrew. And really just giving them that space to say, you know what, it is okay for them to be crying. It is okay for them not to cry. You know, I think that this was an interesting case study of every kind of response that we kind of typically see in kids, where we had one who was like, okay, she was a little tearful, and then she wanted to go to my office and play. We had the oldest daughter, Amy, really wanted to sit at bedside and pray with her dad the entire time. And so we gave her that option in that space. And then Raymond was very emotional and very tearful the entire time. And so really helping that family, you know, and in the luxury of time, I had met this whole family. They really valued the support that we were providing to them. So they really listened when I said, hey, we need to give him this space to feel his feelings. We need to give Amy the space to sit at the bedside and hold dad's hand if that's what she wants. And hey, we also really need to respect Penny's choice that she wants to come down to my office and she would rather color for a little bit, and giving her that space and really just meeting each kid where they're at. And I think that that is the luxury of time, when you're able to build that rapport with families and also kind of begin to recognize, okay, this is when we've met our max and we need to offer sometimes an out of the room. After David died, being able to provide bereavement support for this family. And so kind of the inpatient hospital part of the support that I provided was about a month. And then the next 5 months was just kind of continued bereavement support. So meeting with the kids to prepare them for dad's funeral. We talked about how did they want to participate, what pictures that they wanted displayed, and, you know, yet again, providing choice, respecting that choice, and then preparing them. And so they were a very faithful family. So the oldest daughter was like very much took the charge of, these were the songs that she wanted played. This is the scripture that she wanted in dad's bulletin. And another thing that we really encourage sometimes with families is having some self-addressed envelopes at the back of the space where the service is being held, and some paper so that people can take the paper in the envelope and they can write their favorite memories of that person or share stories. And that's a great way to be able to share those stories with families afterwards. I always encourage parents to read them first before you give them to your kiddos, but I think it's a great way to build some of that connection and that rapport with families. What were some meaning-making interventions that we were able to provide? So as you see in the bottom, we're able to do mosaic crosses with this family. So, you know, those kind of are twofold in the fact that it can be a really kind of, sometimes we encourage kids to write kind of messages underneath the glass. And then when they glue the glass over, we can talk about how in moments where we feel broken, things can still feel beautiful. So we've had families put the wooden heart thumbprint that we complete with them in the middle of their crosses. So it's really an activity that has a lot of space, and it can be an activity that can be done with one child, or we can kind of create it more so that it can be a kind of a family activity and we're building that family connection. A family quilt. So an activity that we did in one of our bereavement visits with this family was each kid decorated a square, and they were able to kind of, and it was however they saw themselves within their family. And then we invited mom back in for our visit, and she was able to decorate a square with them. And so it was kind of their family crest and square and how they were feeling. A big question and something that I prepared Jane for her kids that they could ask, but they ultimately ended up asking was, you know, all three kids were really concerned with, if something happens to mom, what's going to happen to us? And so talking with Jane about what that what if plan looked like. At this time, we felt like Jane was really healthy. We didn't think anything was going to happen to her, but what if something did happen? And so we were able to really facilitate that question. And that doesn't necessarily even have to be something that happens at end of life. I think that that's something that we can talk with families about, you know, at new diagnosis. I call it like a fire drill plan. I do it often with kids of like, if something were to happen to your person while you were at school, how would you want to know that information? Or if something were to happen once you know, when we know that an adult has died, or we're talking about, you know, how would you want to be supported in those moments? And when we have the luxury of time, we make a transition into hospice. You know, if your person dies in the middle of the night, do you want to be woken up? If your person dies while you're at school, how do you want to be notified of those things? And the luxury of time gives you those opportunities to plant those seeds with families. So that doesn't necessarily have to be a conversation that you're having right off the bat, straight in the front, but something that you can kind of pace and wait and see what happens. And then how do we celebrate life's milestones after death? So in this particular case, Dad's birthday was shortly after he had died. And so we talked about, how did they want to celebrate Dad's birthday, even though he wasn't going to be here? Each of the kids ended up making birthday cards. They ordered Dad's favorite pizza and they watched movies at the house. So it was a really, beautiful moment for this family to still celebrate Dad, but to also kind of be together as a family. And then how were they able to keep Dad's spirit alive in their family? So they ended up taking their handprint poster and they found a Bible verse that they found really meaningful as a family. And they made like a shadow box that they put in the front of their house. And it's just about giving families those opportunities in that space. I think a lot of times I make a lot of recommendations to families. Other families that I've worked with have said this has been helpful. I don't think it's necessarily always about reinventing the wheel, but I think it's about, giving yourself that opportunity when you know that you have the luxury of meeting with a family more than one time. How are you not cramming a ton of information into your first session, but how are you just kind of planting those seeds and in every subsequent visit, even with some of my families where they say, can we just have like a month-end check-in? We know that this maybe could end differently, but how do we support families in those in that time? And so I think giving them that opportunity. Then what is our scope of practice? Oh, in the top corner is those thumbprint hearts that I had kind of mentioned. And then, so what does it look like to define scope of practice? And I think we are really aware in our role of what time looks like with families when we're continuing to provide bereavement support. It's no hard and fast rule, but kind of our general rule within our team is that we provide bereavement support up to 6 months. But also recognizing that if we recognize kind of more straight off the bat that families are going to need that additional support, we are not licensed counselors. We are not licensed grief therapists. We are not licensed therapists, or at least I am not on my team. And so I have a list of resources that I'm able to pull from where we're able to support our patients and families and give them resources that are specific to their community. So Jane recognized pretty early on that she was going to need some support. She was grieving the loss of her husband. That was a very unexpected loss in a lot of ways, and just how to navigate being a single parent. And she just was like, I need support. So we have in working with I'm lucky enough to work within an adult facility. So we have a great group of care managers that keep a list of things like that. So I'm able to kind of sometimes work smarter, not harder, and request that information from that team. The counseling for the kids, we knew that they were probably going to need some sort of long-term counseling. And so being able to meet them where they were, and we knew that we were going to make a transition visit. So we recognize that kids have experienced loss. In this particular case, these kids have been working with me for 6 months. And so we didn't want the transition from coming to meet with me to feel like another loss. So we had a visit specifically to talk about how this was going to be their last visit with me. It was less of a visit where we talked about feelings or we talked about Dad, and it was really more just addressing that this was going to be their last visit with me, that they were going to then go meet as a family with a therapist, with a grief therapist in our community. And, how could I prepare them for that visit? And it was interesting to see kind of, what their questions were. Were they going to be nice? Did they have to meet all together as a group? In this case, I met a lot of the times with all 3 kids together, but Amy had kind of requested in a side meeting, hey, I'd really like to meet with someone, but I want to do it on my own. Totally okay. So I was able to kind of facilitate some of that with Mom. And I don't think I mentioned it, but we always debrief every visit we do with families. So whether that's with parents, so whether that's we debrief the visit with the kids present, because we want everybody to be on the same page. But every once in a while, there's an opportunity like that one where I recognized that Amy didn't want her siblings to know that. So I just told Jane, hey, I'm going to follow up with, we did our normal debrief. And then I said, hey, I'm going to call you afterwards with just a couple of other things that we need to discuss. So kind of making sure that that's a part of your practice as well. And then, our support group's appropriate. A lot of, in working with kids, we recognize that a lot of times grief or having a parent with a serious illness makes kids feel like they're the only one. I have plenty of kids who come in and meet with me and say, I'm the only person whose parent, fill in the blank, has cancer, has died. And, you know, it's really isolating for these kids. So can we make a referral to a grief camp for them? Can we make a referral to a grief support group? So I think it's really about knowing what resources are available in your area, whether that's, I think Google is a great place for some of that information. I think I work in an adult facility, so a lot of times reaching out to our local children's hospital and say, hey, are you aware of anything new? We work a lot with some of our hospice agencies where we send a lot of patients and families, you know, what resources are available. And then just knowing what's available in your community, I think, is really important. But also, you know, sometimes we have families who live outside of our area who, you know, maybe are visiting or within our, and so, you know, helping yourself figure out how do you find resources in other areas. So I think every time you provide support for patients and families, it looks a little bit different. I'm really blessed with the luxury of time. I'm blessed with very supportive staff that I work with. I work with a really great team of child life specialists across our health system. But I think it's just really important to know that that we recognize that time is a luxury, and there are plenty of times where I don't have this luxury of time when I'm providing support for patients and families. But I hope in talking through this case study, you were able to just kind of see the various ways we're able to provide support for families. Before I pass it off to Deanna, and she's going to talk a little bit about how she provides a little bit longer term support for families.
Rachel, thank you so much. That's just great, amazing content. I do have a couple of questions for you while you guys sort of transition between you and Deanna. But one, Emily asked, which I think you answered already, is how long are you able to provide bereavement support after the death, which I heard you answer, but is it closed-ended or open-ended meetings?
So kind of, it depends a little bit about the situation. So there have definitely been families that I've provided like kind of our 6-month support. We kind of transition them out into the community. And then like 6 months later, the family calls me and says, hey, like, we know you gave us this list. But we didn't reach out to any of those people. Can you resend it? Or we have families where maybe I have a couple of follow-up meetings and it's much shorter within that 6-month kind of timeline. And then they call, you know, 6 months later and say, hey, we need a little bit of extra support. So sometimes it might be a one-time meeting as we're making kind of that connection for that support. Anytime we're doing that though, I'm always kind of bouncing that back off of our director before I make any of those calls. Sometimes it's, you know, families will call and I'm like, ooh, you know, what you're asking for is outside of my scope. And so kind of making that initial direct referral right off the bat and saying, no, I'm really sorry, we're not able to meet with you. But in some cases, if it's just, you know, we need kind of a little bit of transition support, somebody else has died in the family, there's some extra going on. Sometimes it's just a kind of a gut call of whether or not one more visit, even if it's outside that 6-month window. And we're normally able to do that. So it's a little bit of both. So I'm sorry, that it's a little I know it can be a little confusing whether it's open or closed or, but I always tell families, you know, we're an extra layer of support. So I would rather them call me, and whether or not it's me, sometimes it's just a phone. Like the other day I spoke with a grandma who was like, I think we need this extra support. I know you gave these resources to my son-in-law. Can I get them again so I can give them to him? Absolutely. You know, I would rather her call, even though technically that was 2 years ago. I would rather her call and reach out than be lost in the wilderness, for lack of a better phrase.
Sure. Thank you. And then I have just two, these are more concrete questions about the activities, and then we'll turn it over to Deanna. Are the bracelets made of leather? I think it looked like it from the picture, but.
Yes, they are. So we get those either from S&S or I think they come from S&S, and they're called like leather wristlets. They're not called bracelets. If you Google leather bracelet, it does not come up, and you're like, that's what they're called. But they're called, I think they're called leather wristlets, and I'm pretty sure we get them. I should know this. I do all of our ordering. I did all of our ordering for our team for years. Shh, don't tell anyone. They're probably watching going, what is wrong with Rachel? But they're like leather wristlets, but they are leather based. And we also have like cloth slap bracelets that sometimes we offer to families. It just kind of is a more age dependent, what kind of marker do I feel like I can trust you with kind of thing sometimes.
Great, thank you. And then one other, Do you make the handprint poster for each member of the family, and is it on canvas or paper?
So it kind of depends. In this case, this was one big poster that we did for the family, and we use, it's like heavier cardstock. It's not canvas. It's just heavier printer paper that we have found. We get it from like Office Depot or like an office supply store. And so it kind of depends. In this case, we made a big family handprint poster, and then each of the kids wanted dad's handprint on their own piece of paper, and we did that on colored cardstock. So I sometimes, for the luxury of time, in this case, we knew we had some time, so we were able to kind of do that as a family. For families that want multiple copies, sometimes what I'll do is just do like a black and white print, and then, you know, encourage them to go make copies or something like that if that's something that they want, like more than 5 is kind of my general rule, because adult handprints get a little difficult at times. They're not as easy sometimes as like when I worked in peds. So something to just kind of think about. But most of the time families are so appreciative of the one or the option to make copies that they're pretty receptive of that. But the thumbprint, like the tiny like hearts that we provide, those are wooden hearts that we get. We've provided like 50 and 60 to families at times. So it, you know, it's just kind of meeting each family where they're at and kind of helping them assess, you know, what their needs are, but also being mindful of your materials and your budget and things like that.
Sure. Thank you, Rachel. Kathy, let me know if there was anything else about that question. And I think we'll go ahead and turn it over to Deanna to walk through the second part of this presentation. And again, thank you all for submitting your questions. Keep them coming, and I'll put them in there as I can.
Hello. Yes, I'm Deanna with Wonders and Worries in Austin. And what I think most of you that are familiar with Wonders and Worries know that we have generally a set curriculum that we work with to start with. And so when we're working with those families, we have that curriculum, but after those 6 times, does the care just end? Are we done there? And the answer is, if the family's coping great and they have the needs available to them, then we would be available as needed. But a lot of times we do need to continue those sessions, whether they're continuing to have a hard time coping, or the parent has a big surgery coming up and needs continued support, or it does end up becoming an anticipatory grief situation. So that's where we're going to go today. So here are just a couple of activities that I like to do. So with our continued check-in sessions, I've already been working with these children in our case. And so I have already established that rapport with them. So I still are always going to do a game, some kind of icebreaker game. And the way I do that is typically whichever game that whichever was their favorite throughout our sessions, then we'll continue that, whether that's playing Uno together, having the big beach ball with questions on it, and virtually we each have that, or in person to toss it back and forth. So whatever the game might be, just to relax things and get talking a little bit more. So with these 2 activities here, I love to do these with a lot of our kiddos, but I have a recent 16-year-old that I worked with. Her mom had Huntington's disease, and she was dealing with a lot of anxiety surrounding the own possibility of herself having Huntington's as well, and watching how her mom declined and became end of life. So these are some big things that we worked with her. So with the mindfulness 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the way that it works, we practice it together. So identify 5 things you see. And so I see my dog, I see my computer, I see my water, I see a bird out the window, and I see the plant. Okay, identify 4 things that you hear. So I hear the birds chirping, I hear a car driving by, I hear my computer running, and I hear my voice talking. 3 things you feel. So I can feel the rug on my toes, I feel my hands on my shirt, and then I feel my hair. 2 things you smell. I smell the lunch that was in the oven earlier, and I smell a candle that I have going. One thing that you taste, I still taste the coffee on my breath from this morning. So, but walking that the kids and teens. So this is a really effective activity for really all the ages, but it brings them to, helps them to be more grounded. So with this teen that I worked, we practiced it a lot, and she printed this paper off and posted it up in her home. So when she was feeling really anxious, to stop, find 5 things I see, 4 things, 3, 2, 1, to slowly work her way down, and just ground her. With the handprint activity, what we do is having the kids or teens again trace their hands, and same thing with the same 16-year-old. I had her also trace her hand, and let's write on the inside what I can control. So I can choose to love. I can choose that I'm going to exercise to eat today. I can choose what I'm going to eat, the food I'm going to put in my mouth. I can choose what time I'm going to bed and what activities I'm going to do during the day. What I can't control sometimes is how others are going to act or respond towards me, maybe the weather or sickness, my mom's illness. I can't control that. So just again, it helps to, one, we're getting it out, whether it's writing or in verbalizing, talking about it, and validating those together, and then having that visual. So I love both of these. It's having that visual of what is in my control, what's out of my control, and bringing us back to here in the present. So here's another one that's really good for the younger ones, the littles. So the worry monster poem, if you're not familiar with it, is, I'm your little worry monster. I am always here. When worries pop into your head, don't let them turn to fear. Take a piece of paper, make sure you write your name, explain your worry, write it clear and plain. Put the worry into my mouth and let me eat the fear. Put a smile upon your face, then give a great big cheer. So this is really effective with the littles. I have an 8-year-old girl I worked with. Her mom had a breast cancer diagnosis. She seemed to do okay during the day, but at night, she was really struggling at night. She couldn't fall asleep at night. She kept getting out of bed. She kept coming in to check on her mom to her mom's room, just regressing in that sense. So what really helped her is, again, to have that visual. So we created a tissue box. You can see the example with the monsters here. It's just so simple, and they can do however they want with their construction paper. And having her on strips of paper write out her worries, and she had the option to share them with her mom or to not share them, but to write out her worries and feed the monster. She had this on her nightstand, and the monster ate her worries and took her worries for her so that she was able to sleep at night, and it helped her to calm. So we really, again, practiced and talked about this a lot. It was very therapeutic for her. As she's laying there, thought or worry pops into her mind, write it on the paper, or sometimes she would draw it, put it into feed the monster. He's going to take the worry, he's going to eat it so that she can relax. So again, just that physical, tangible thing. Balloons. So I love anything with the balloons. So a couple different examples of how balloons could be used. Again, these could either be used in person if you're working with the child, or if it's something that is virtual, something that we can mail to the home. So what we can do is worries with the balloons. So share a time that they felt an emotion, and this could be any emotion that they want to share. It could be a worry, it could be a fear, an anger feeling, whatever that feeling was. And then to share something that helps them when they felt that emotion. Tell where in that body they feel it. So we try and identify, is it, a headache? Is it your hands are real sweaty, or your fists and you're angry? Do you feel it in your belly? Do you feel sick? Do you feel it in your feet and you just want to run and stomp around? And then tell them something a loved one could do for them. So how can your mom or your dad or your loved one help you when you're feeling this way? So that is one way the balloons can be used. This is a great family, could be a family activity as well, or individual. So another one that I like to do with the balloons is to have them blow up the balloons. As they're blowing them up, think about their worry, think about blowing the worry away, taking the deep breaths, blowing into the balloon, tie the balloon. Either I'm helping them or the parent is helping to tie, and to write with Sharpie on the balloon the worry or the angry feeling, whatever it might be. To write it all out, share it if they choose to, some don't, and then have the balloons and jump on them, stomp them, or take a pen and stab at it, poke at it, with the parent's permission, whatever's appropriate. I have a 12-year-old boy. The dad had gastric cancer. He had a lot of anger issues. He was very angry, did not want to talk to me about his feelings, did not, he was very active too, had a hard time just sitting still. So this was a perfect activity for him. It got him up, it got him physical, and it was fun. So he kept doing this activity over and over and over and over again. And by the end, he was like, oh, and he felt better. He was excited for our next session. It just helped us connect a little more. Something else, if you have access to helium tank or to have balloons that already have helium in, then it's really cool to talk about writing your feelings out and then really letting your feelings go, like going outside and letting them go. So I acknowledge that that's not always a possibility. It definitely hasn't been with me, but if you have access to that, how cool is that too? So groups. So we also are doing groups. We do a school age group, a check-in group, and then a tween teen check-in group right now that is being done virtually. So all of these activities can be done in person or adapted virtually. A lot of the activities I've already talked about can definitely be adapted for group, and then vice versa. The ones I'm going to talk about for group can definitely be done individual. So that's kind of the nice thing about that. So with our check-in groups, those are going to be for the kids and teens that have been through our regular session, met with us on a regular basis, but still might benefit from some continued support, but otherwise seems to be coping okay and has other coping tools in hand. So the teen groups and the school age groups are great, and I know Rachel mentioned it too, because they realize they're not alone. Although a lot of these kids and teens feel so alone. I'm the only one that understands. No one else gets this. And so the groups are a great way to do that. Two different routes we can go with this. So I have a 14-year-old boy that I worked with who was extremely shy. And mom wanted him to be a part of our group, but knew that he would be reluctant. And she shared with me ahead of time that he was very shy. I don't think I've ever worked with a teen as shy as he was. When we were in group, he would not speak. Any activity that I did, he would participate in the activity, and he would listen to everybody, but would not speak. And we always give permission when it comes to you. You do not share if you don't have to share. And we make that very clear in front of everyone. So of course, inside I'm wondering, oh my gosh, is he getting anything out of this? Is this helping him? Well, his mom did follow up that after group, he talked about group. He talked about what the other kids were doing and saying, that he seemed to be in such a better mood. So sometimes for those super shy ones, it's helpful to still, he did the activity, didn't share it, but I'm okay with that. And then to hear what other kids and teens were saying was really beneficial for him. On the other side, we also have, I've seen it so many times, where a child or teen will say, well, I got really angry when my mom left to go away for a week, and I was stuck to do the dishes all week, something like that. And then you might hear someone else, oh yeah, I felt that way too, but I felt guilty for feeling that way. I didn't know that was okay. Oh, I felt guilty too. And so it's really neat for them to be like, oh, okay. It's very validating for them. So with our groups, I'm always going to start out again with the icebreaker, right? So again, I referenced the beach ball earlier, but the beach ball again. So just or any ball, right? Any big ball. We like to use the blow up beach balls. You can write a question, and we toss it to each other, throw it up, catch it, and whichever their thumb, we choose your hand, thumb, wherever it lands on your right hand, that's the question you read. So just a great icebreaker, and getting up and getting physical really helps break some of that tension. So one of my favorite activities, again, this is one that could be done individually or in a group, are worry dolls. So simple. So you can do the worry dolls with pipe cleaners. You can add in beads, feathers, yarn, however detailed you want to do the worry doll. But we talk about how in Guatemala, these dolls are traditionally made very colorful, and that the legend of the worry doll is that the belief that the worry doll could do the job of worrying for you so that you can worry less and improve your sense of well-being. And so then we talk about how everybody worries, and sometimes that helps to tell someone about their worry, and so it can help you. And so with this activity, one, we're getting the kids' hands busy, the teens' hands busy, and yes, this works with teens as well. But as they're busy, then they start talking, right? And so that's where they can start talking about their worries, sharing their worries, validating their feelings, letting them know that both adults and kids have worries, and sometimes these worries can help us from sleeping, can help with our health. And so another thing we talk about is in the legend, you can give the doll your worry, tell it your worry, and then put it under your pillow at night. So with a lot of these kids and teens, sleeping is an issue. And that way the doll can do the job of the worrying for you. So it's just really, it's nice to talk about how normal it is to have worries, and it just really opens up the lines of communication in a non-threatening way. And just to help them have that inanimate object to get their worries out is really beneficial. Same thing with the fidget toy. So again, that can be done. This is with a popsicle stick with beads and pipe cleaners, and you could add into this whatever you want. You can be super creative, but again, it's just getting the kids' hands busy. You could also give the worries to that. Talk about how sometimes we show our worry in our hands and we get fidgety. So having that available to help as a coping tool. So equipping them with this coping tool. Kids yoga, if you can either have like a recorded yoga class and do that with the kids, or have someone come in, or even just do bits and pieces. So maybe just teaching the kids basic mindfulness or meditation and practicing deep breathing together, or choosing a couple of poses that can be calming. But kids yoga is a great thing to help calm kids. And therapy dogs, if you have a way to bring a therapy dog into a session or groups, again, I know COVID really puts a kink in things right now, but therapy dogs are just really therapeutic, as we know, right? Just again, having something to do with their hands and just talking, calming, able to get some of those feelings out. So another thing that we do are family sessions. So we would most likely do family sessions if it seems as though the parent that is ill is going to pass away, and so or going on hospice or whatever it might be. But bringing those families together, a couple different options. We can talk about these activities and either send the parents home with them or mail the items to the home, or if the family has access to the items, sending them directions on how to do these items at home, and they can do it themselves. Or we are definitely there to help facilitate these activities. So the first one I want to talk with is the Family Strength Garden or Family Rock Garden. And again, if they're going to come do that with us at our facility, then I will have a variety of rocks set out. They can choose their rocks, or if they're going to do it at home, then they can go out together and find the rocks on their own together. And that can be another activity they do together as a family. And then what we do, they can paint or just use Sharpies, whatever, invite the family to write their strengths, each of their own strengths on their rock or the rocks. They can choose as many rocks as they want. And then together talk about, as a family, all of the strengths that they have and how those strengths can help the family through their parents' illness. How can they all come together? Like put all the rocks together. And then identify a place in the home to keep these rock garden. Another one is to invite each family member to write down their hopes or their wishes, and you can add those to the rocks as well. So this, the goal in this is to really help identify each of the strengths of each family member and how they will help them cope, how each of those strengths can help each family member cope. It gets them talking and it's fun. So this can be a really good therapeutic one as well. And another one that you can see the pictures on here, and I know Rachel talked about the handprints. Handprints are huge, right? We really love this one. It's another one with the handprint. There's the way that Rachel did it, other ways that she does with her families. It's just overall allowing the parent and child to work together on an activity and then having a tangible, long-lasting family connection memory that they'll always have together. So we talk about how our hands are our identity because, are part of our representations of our identity because no two fingerprints are alike. And talking about how, again, each family member is unique and has their own uniqueness, their own strengths to offer to the family. So we then leave it very open, so how the family wants to do this. And again, this is something they can do at home on their own or that we can do with them in our group, in our office setting. So you can see a couple examples here. The one family on the right, they chose to each make their own. So each child wanted to make their own canvas and have their own canvas to hold on to, but it has all of the family's handprints. Whereas the bottom one, the family did make one canvas and wrote their strengths on each of the hands. I have another family that I worked with, and they did create a tree. So they drew the trunk of the tree, and then they really took the time and thought about having, the dad had stage 4 cancer. He had his hand in the middle, and they chose a certain color that they felt represented each family member. And then they very carefully and thoughtfully talked about and spent a lot of time on how each of the other family members' hands would intertwine on the canvas with their paint color, intertwining in the dad's fingers on the canvas. So it was really beautiful. And again, it opened up communication, and you have this long-lasting activity for forever. Another, I just put in there a few games that I love to either do or have the family do at home. So I'm sharing this one. I don't think they are making it anymore, but it's an old game, Chatter Matters, and it has what you can do is it has different, charades or drawing or doodling. Cranium is another kind of version of this, but it gets the family members talking. So, another one might be, life stories is another one that I don't think they're making anymore either. But, just these fun games to get the families together. So if I'm working with families, then I'll have a game and I will be there to facilitate it, but I am not playing in the game. I let them play in the game, but finding a game that really gets them talking and working together and doing that teamwork together. So I love to start with a game and then have the family work on whether it's the rock garden or the tree. And then finally, if it's more of an individual, the anticipatory grief, again, or bereavement. So we do have our 6 sessions that we typically do, and then the extended sessions depending on the circumstances. If it is end of life or if the death has already occurred, what we do is a little bit different than even our Austin office, but what I do here in San Antonio, we have an incredible children's bereavement center that we have a close relationship with. So after a death occurs, I am going to work with the kids or teens 1 or 2 times after, just to process and follow up with kind of what happened, and then transition them over to the children's bereavement center where they can be a part of individual counseling or group support groups over there. So the Memory Rock Garden is just like our Family Strength Garden, just instead it is having the kids write on rocks their favorite words, characteristics, or their favorite memories of their loved one. And then I have a lot of families find a place either inside the home or outside, maybe create a little garden. And when they're missing their loved one, they can go to that spot, grab onto that rock, and read those memories, or just kind of hold on to what it was about their loved one. We also like to do journals, customized memory journals. So an acrostic poem is one of the pages we like to do, and I let them choose. So let's say it's mom, and mom's name is Jenny. So we might have them write M-O-M, and then what is it, they choose either mom or the mom's first name. I've had them do both. So if they choose mom, then for the M, it might be magnificent. For the O, it might be an offered love. And then the other M, or if they choose to do Jenny, maybe the J was jumping all the time, and going down, is just another option that they can do. So the I am poem, we can do, and you can customize this however you want, but I am, and then have them fill it out. Very open-ended. I want, have them fill it out. I need, I hope, I feel, etc., and whatever else you want to add. And what I like to do is type this up and have the pages either mailed, emailed, or in person, and then they can complete them and finish them. You can find really cute books too already kind of made at places like Hobby Lobby or Michael's. Hand tracings. We've talked about hands a lot. This case, the child or teen tracing their two hands, one hand. What are the things or lessons I want to hold on to that my mom taught me or my loved one taught me that died? What are the things or lessons that I want to let go of? So maybe something that was kind of holding them back, or a fight that they had that they can't let go of. And then another page, a list of the things their loved one taught me. And then another page, similarities and differences. I get a lot of talking that happens with the child or teen in this space. So what do me and my mom or loved one have the same? And what about us was different? And then a picture. They can either draw or kind of attach one to there. So that, and these are all, again, it's just helping these kids work through it. It doesn't have to be a lot of talking, but just a lot of being present and having the kids be busy with their hands. So, and then that is a lot of how we do, and just a few of the many activities we have, but these are some of my favorites. And I'll turn it back to Missy.
Thank you so much, Deanna, both you and Rachel. I appreciate so much all the valuable information you shared, and your time and your talents and your expertise with us. If you can just flip to the next slide for me, please. I know some people might need to jump off, so I want to cover this. And then if there's any additional questions, so certainly we can still take those for a couple minutes. You can text those to Q&A them to me. But like I said earlier, the QR code you see there, that will take you to the post-assessment. When you leave this meeting, the evaluation will pop up, so you can do the evaluation. Then if you need the PDU credit, you can go purchase that. In an effort to sort of preserve and protect some time for our staff and do some self-care, especially at this, although unusual, busy holiday season, we are not going to have one of our WonderChats. I will be sad in December to not see you all and connect with you, but we will meet back up again in January. Our topic then is going to be boundaries and ethics. So hopefully you'll join us then. You'll still hear from me next month because we have some exciting things coming. So you'll get my monthly professional email if you've subscribed to that list. And we have some exciting things happening that I'll be sharing with you in there. But thank you so much for joining us today. Again, thank you to Deanna and Rachel. I don't see any additional questions coming through. So I think we will sign off for today. Wishing you all a safe and healthy holiday season. And we will look forward to reconnecting with you on a WonderChat in January. Thanks, everyone.